Tastemakers was funded in part by
It all comes down to creating something unique. It's important to take pride in one's work and share expertise. Edward Jones is proud to support the craftspeople who define the maker movement.
and by Fleischmann's Yeast and A.B. Mowry.
People have been turning soybeans into tofu for about 2,000 years. The product originated in China and is made by coagulating soy milk and pressing the curds, which is a lot like making cheese. In this episode of Tastemakers, you are going to meet Jenny Yang, the woman behind Phoenix Bean Tofu, right here in Chicago. I'm Kat Neville, and I've been telling the story of local food for about 20 years. In that time, I've seen the American food movement explode in tiny towns and big cities from coast to coast. In Tastemakers, I explore the maker movement and take you along for the journey to meet the makers who define the flavor of American cuisine. Chicago is a massive urban area and is home to 2.7 million people, and it spans over 200 square miles. And while the city may seem disconnected from Illinois, a highly agrarian state, it's not. In fact, Illinois grows the most soybeans of any state in the nation, and some of those precious soybeans make it here and into Phoenix Bean Tofu, the subject of this episode of Tastemakers.
About 19 years ago, I walked into Phoenix Bean because I saw the Chinese sign on the street and we live in the neighborhood. So I walked in and said, "What do you do here?" And the lady told me they sell tofu here, making tofu, fresh tofu, and fresh soy milk every day. I was like hitting the jackpot because I'm lactose intolerant. My daughter is lactose intolerant. And I don't like the people who has shelf life 90 days, 6 months shelf life, or a year shelf life tofu. In Asia, we don't eat that kind of tofu. We eat a couple days fresh, we eat it right away. And there's no waste. They produce what they can sell, and then we buy, and 3 days later we finish, and then we buy a fresh one again. So I say I hit the jackpot. 7 years later, I work in the corporate America. 2 hours commute to the burbs, or 3 hours sometimes coming back home. Kids are young, it just doesn't make sense to me. It's kind of like a midlife crisis. So when I come over here to buy the tofu, it was not cooking, it was nobody there, only the owner sitting in the dark little room office there. So I asked, "Where's everybody?" He says, "Oh no, we don't want to make too much, the business is bad, I want to sell the business." I feel he's concerned, I feel really bad, but I live on his product. I live on his tofu, I live on his soy milk. I said, no, you cannot close. And he was like, "Girl, what do you know about running a business, and you want to take it over?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, why don't you sell it to me?" A year later, we bought the company, and the entire team stayed, and I quit my job. I decided to just pull my all lifetime savings and to buy this business with my mother-in-law, a few good friends of mine. Tofu, I would say, it's like vegetarian cheese. Basically is a side product for soybeans. So from the beans to the tofu, it's just 4 steps to make all the tofu.
Tofu is made by soaking, grinding, boiling, and then straining out soybeans. The resulting soy milk is curdled and then pressed into blocks. We're gonna go in and check out how Phoenix Bean makes its tofu, but first I have to put on a hairnet.
We select our beans, has to be a certain size, has a certain protein content. We don't like the perfect round soybeans. We like to be weathered, which turns out to be non-GMO beans. And we wash them and then soak them overnight, which actually turns sprouted already. So we use the sprouted soybean clean, and then we start grinding them. We use a special machine to grind them to keep the edamame flavor still in the tofu.
So one of the things that distinguishes the way that Jenny makes her tofu is that in the grinding process, she uses volcanic rocks rather than stainless steel blades. And what that does is it helps to retain the nutty character of the bean, and you end up with a better flavor in your tofu. It has that bean flavor as opposed to just being bland. This is the soy milk.
Yes, this is the soy milk. It's a creamy, off-white color. Smells really good.
It does. It smells really great in here.
Use soy milk that was generated from the soaking process and grinding process, and we curd them. So from the soy milk, curd, and then separate the whey from the solid is exactly the same as the cheese process. We produce about 3,000 pounds of tofu a day. We have about 23 regular items that we produce, from extra soft, firm tofu. Then we have fried, baked, and smoked. So those are basic ones. Soft tofu, we use the most soybeans, take most labor intensive. We actually pre-pressed it. So when you cut our tofu, our soft tofu actually won't fall apart. It will just stay in the shape, and then you put it on the wok, the square or any shape that you keep is still there. The baked one is like as firm as a chicken breast. And then smoked is almost like a steak texture. So it's just like different texture for people to use. And then tofu noodles. We make sheets by hand and then cut it over the pasta noodle shape. And then the last 2 years, we add on a lot of tofu salads. Yes, we have a lot of tofu. Okara is a Japanese term, is the solids after you squeeze all the soybean juice out. The solid part is okara.
So this is the okara. This is the byproduct of the soy milk making process. And this is typically thrown away, but it is a perfectly edible and
Organic
wonderful
side
product.
product, yes.
Right, exactly. So we're actually going to head over and meet the folks at Loyola University who are partnered with Jenny to find innovative ways to use this okara.
The food system in the United States is very inefficient. It has lots of waste. We use lots of inputs like chemicals, and it isn't a circular system the way that a sustainable system would work. And so what we're trying to do here at the Institute of Environmental Sustainability is really bring to light what the inefficiencies in our food system are and how we could make them better, more sustainable, more organic, more local. And this is part of what gave us this idea to work with Jenny and Phoenix Bean, because she produces an enormous amount of okara, which is the waste that comes from the soybean once it's pressed and the tofu part of it is extracted. You end up with these shells of the bean, and they're huge in terms of their nutrition. There's a lot of nitrogen, there's a lot of carbon. That can go into animal feed. It can go into making energy. It can also go into using it as a fertilizer for soils. So we've partnered with her, really trying to look at how can we reuse this waste product of yours and make it into another co-product.
Let's take a look at the okara.
Sure. Happy to show you this. So what we're doing here is we've taken some of Jenny's okara and we've mixed it with sawdust, which gives it a lot more of a carbon, kind of a base. And then we seeded it, as you can see, this sort of white cottony looking stuff on the top with oyster mushroom spores. And they begin to grow these things that we call mycelia. Over time, you will start to see the big fruiting bodies of the oyster mushroom. We have to cut little X's in here so that they can grow out. But it's really an effective substrate for growing oyster mushrooms.
What made you think of using the okara specifically to grow mushrooms?
It's very nitrogen rich, you know, because soybeans are what we call nitrogen fixers, and they're able to produce a lot of nitrogen from the atmosphere and take it up into their tissues. And so the casting, the okara, has a lot of that nitrogen in it, which the oyster mushroom needs in order to grow. And so you have to get the right balance of carbon to nitrogen in order to feed the fungus or the mushroom. So we're experimenting with different amounts of okara versus the sawdust to see what can give us the most mushrooms.
When you first heard that you were going to do this project, what got you excited about it?
Well, I eat Phoenix Beans tofu every week. I'm vegetarian, and this is how I get my protein. I shop at their farmer's market and buy their goods at the local store. And so I was excited to join a project that was going to take a product that I use and make it more sustainable and helpful for the environment. Because they produce a lot of okara every day. For 2,000 pounds of tofu, they create 2,000 pounds of okara.
Logically, you know, I'm thinking it's an organic product. It can go to a landfill and it'll like naturally break down because I don't understand the science. Like I don't understand until I talk to all of you that this product actually in an anaerobic environment doesn't break down and then it releases this methane. So what you're doing is not just looking at reducing food waste, you're also looking at reducing the greenhouse gas impact that this waste is having on the environment.
Exactly, yeah. We often talk about the impacts of carbon dioxide, but methane is much stronger, and it's being produced by the tons every day in landfills across the country.
Our partnership with Jenny is particularly unique and valuable because she has her own ethic of not wanting to produce food that isn't perfectly healthy and not wanting to produce waste that goes into the landfill. So she's already thinking sustainably.
By working with Loyola University, we not only can reduce the waste from 80% to maybe only 25% in volume, but we also learned a way to use okara to grow mushroom to reduce our salad costs, which we put mushroom in the salads. And then secondly, we can do okara cookies to create new product for us to generate new revenues. So it's a great, great partnership with them.
When you think about cooking with tofu, you probably think first of Asian flavors, but tofu is kind of like chicken. It plays well with others. And so today, we're gonna stop here at Big Star and see what Chef Julie Warpinski is cooking up with Jenny's tofu skin.
Julie at Big Star, she sent me an email saying that Big Star is trying to change their menu, bring more plant-based recipe. Was it Mexican restaurant is going to use our tofu? Oh, great. I immediately thought of several recipes. But she says, no, specifically, I want yuba. I was like, yuba for Mexican food. That's interesting. So I prepared very thick layer, sheets of yuba, or very thin, so you can mush together, and so let her to play with it.
So I'm standing here in the kitchen with Julie Warpinski, and she is going to show me how she utilizes Yuba, Jenny's tofu skin, in their vegetarian tacos. So first of all, tell me about Big Star and what the restaurant's like, and tell me about your menu and your inspirations for it.
So Big Star is sort of a casual, honky-tonk, sort of Mexican street food establishment. We do serve Mexican food, but we like to sort of have fun with Mexican food.
And that's the great thing about tofu is that it's kind of a blank canvas, right? I mean,
Right.
you can apply almost any flavor to it.
Yes.
So tell me what the tofu skin tastes like, what the texture is.
So tofu skinned meat, it's very nutty, and the texture is actually a little bit firmer and chewier. And that sort of reminds me, when I was testing it out, crisping it up, trying to treat it like meat, it started taking on some meat characteristics, a little bit more crispiness than actual firm tofu and other things could bring on. So yuba was definitely a more unique route for us to go when we were looking for a vegan option.
So show me how you make these tacos.
Yeah, of course. So we try and treat this like we would meat. We're just marinating each sheet individually. So after this is marinating for a while, we will take that over to the griddles and we'll grill it up.
So we've seen just how versatile tofu can be, and our next stop is at Eli's Cheesecake here in Chicago. They are using Jenny's tofu to replace milk and eggs in their vegan cheesecake.
There was a lot of interest in our consumers in alternative products, and people really were pursuing, vegan lifestyle and wanting the product. And we really had the challenge of coming up with something that we could call Eli's, but really was a vegan product. And as we looked around and started sourcing ingredients, we found Jenny Yang, and it was really so natural to work with her because of her dedication, passion, commitment, energy. And so when we can combine our story with her story, it's really a great connection.
I'm standing in the R&D kitchen here at Eli's Cheesecake with Diana. She has been with the company for what, over like almost 30 years?
Just about over 30 years.
And so in that time, you've introduced a lot of different products because you really make a lot of stuff.
Correct.
Here with Eli's. Dairy-free cheesecake doesn't sound like it would be tasty.
Exactly.
But the way that you have developed the recipe, the tofu that's really kind of mimicking that texture, the silky texture.
That's right. You know, we went through so many different tofus to find the right tofu that would blend well and mimic like cream cheese. So we went to Jenny's place, and she was actually showing us how it was made. And so actually, we got the curd, and the curd is what made this product so smooth and creamy and very nice. So we were able to get that from Jenny, and it was a win-win for both of us.
So show me how you make it.
All right, so this is the tofu, and I had to just put it in the Cuisinart and just kind of blend it up a little bit so it's really silky. And I am using a vegan cream cheese.
Okay.
And then sugar, chocolate, cocoa, and a little bit of cornstarch, salt, and vanilla.
It looks amazing.
It's really chocolatey.
When you think of tofu, you think of healthy and light, but this is something where you're using tofu and you can really indulge.
You can.
Thank you very much, Diana.
You're welcome.
Standing here in the middle of Chicago, it is tough to picture what the rest of Illinois looks like, but it's made up of farmland. And in fact, Illinois is the highest producing state of soybeans in the country. Jenny works directly with small farmers to source her soybeans, so let's hit the road and meet one of those farmers now.
My son and my nephew and I all farm together, and we farm 2,500 acres of organic crops, different types of corn, different types of wheat, and different types of soybeans. I was a conventional farmer for 23 years, and I had an interest in organic farming. I wanted to get away from herbicides, pesticides,
And I felt that if my son never had to handle a pound of chemicals, that I would be successful. And so in 2003, we were able to transition to organic. Most everything we raise is contracted, and we are not affected by the commodity markets, the Board of Trade, such as conventional farmers. What we raise, our identity preserved, we know exactly where they were raised, and we can sell the right crop to the right buyer. The value of direct marketing to either consumers or processors is that we develop a relationship where they're assured that their grain that I'm raising is raised in a certain way, the way they want it raised, the quality that they want, and we can deliver it when they want it, where they want it. So I met Jenny Yang from Phoenix Bean at the Good Food Festival, which is put on by familyfarm.org. And then we started developing a relationship, and so here we are, probably 4 years later, 5 years later. We sell her all of her organic soybeans. We have them cleaned and bring them up to her. This is a soybean plant. A soybean plant is legume. Each one of these blossoms here is called a node. Each one of those blossoms will become a pod that will have about 3 soybeans in it. We plant these in late May, early June, and then they're harvested. And then we store the soybeans in a grain bin until Jenny asks us to bring her soybeans to process. I just feel good about not putting all these pesticides on the soil. And I'm not only providing a product to Jenny, I'm providing it at a price that we can afford to have enough workers and they can have a good living. And also, I'm improving the soil. So it's a win-win-win.
Coming about to work every day, it's rewarding, it's inspiring, but this entrepreneurial work is not for everybody. All I was thinking is flexible schedule, closer to home, and so I can take care of my kids. If my kids grow up bright and happy, that's my goal. But I spent a lot of time in the beginning. Actually, my son was 2 years old. He said, "Does Mom still live in this house?" So that's when I started thinking about the company need to grow in the healthy way. It's not only me. If it's all on me, it's not going to be healthy. The food system here, it's very interesting. Who's going to sell your product? How can you sell it there? Who is going to ship it over for you? Those are all logistics. But working together, how to make it happen, it's a totally different way. It's more of a social conscious movement. One person can invent something and people don't appreciate in the community, you will not grow. It's very complex, 360 degrees. There are many, many layers of a relationship that you have to manage.
So we've had a chance to see how Julie, the chef over at Big Star, uses Jenny's tofu. We've also seen how they're utilizing it at Eli's Cheesecake. But how can you actually cook with tofu at home? So the recipe that Jenny is going to show us today is actually your mom's. Yes. Is that right?
This one, spicy stir fry, particularly was my mom's.
So is she just a great cook?
She is. She's a wonderful cook.
Let's walk through the ingredients here. This is your extra firm, pre-fried tofu.
Yes.
And it is very, very firm, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's very resilient.
You poke it, it won't break it. You drop it, it won't break it either. You still keep the good shape. So that's why we call extra firm.
Mm-hmm. This is a chili garlic paste. This is black bean. Obviously, we have some just chopped white onion,
yes.
minced ginger, garlic, and then sugar. So I'm actually going to get out of the way and let Jenny whip this up on the stove. This is the kind of dish that you could really have on like a cold winter night that would just kind of warm you from the inside out.
Yes.
I love
the
it.
whole thing, heat it up and watch a movie. That's it.
Well, that sounds perfect.
Yes.
Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time. And I think it's about time we dig in.
That's right.
I can't wait to taste this. There's more information on the makers featured in this series, along with recipes and extra videos at wearetastemakers.com.
Tastemakers was funded in part by
It all comes down to creating something unique. It's important to take pride in one's work and share expertise. Edward Jones is proud to support the craftspeople who define the maker movement.
and by Fleischmann's Yeast and A.B. Mowry.